Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at something truly mind-bending. We're going to explore what's called the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM for short. And honestly, this is a totally new, fascinating way to understand our minds, our pain, and even our subconscious. It basically takes everything we thought we knew about neurology and adds this incredible layer of biomechanics right on top of it.
So think about this for a second. What if your worst migraine, your afternoon brain fog, and your most vivid nightmares all shared the exact same physical root cause? I know it sounds like a massive stretch, right? Usually we just pop a pill for a headache, drink a ton of coffee to push through the brain fog, and just try to forget about the nightmares. But what if they aren't actually separate issues at all? What if they're literally just different alarms going off from the exact same overloaded system?
Okay, let's jump into Section 1, Beyond the Blood Vessels. To really wrap our heads around this new model, we first need to look at what a headache actually is and how our understanding of it has shifted over the years. For the longest time, the classic medical explanation for migraines was pretty much all about blood vessels. The idea was that your blood vessels dilate, and that causes pain in the meninges and the nerves wrapping around your brain. But science evolves, you know? Today, modern neuroscience looks at a migraine very differently. It's no longer just a plumbing issue. It's now understood as a super complex disorder of brain dynamics. We're talking about altered network excitability, activation of the trigeminal-vascular system, and this thing called abnormal sensory gain. That's basically when your brain totally fails to filter out ordinary sights and sounds, making literally everything feel overwhelming.
But here is a totally wild fact to set the stage for you. The brain parenchyma, which is the actual squishy tissue of the brain itself, is largely insensitive to direct pain. It literally doesn't have pain receptors. So if the brain itself can't feel pain, why on earth does a migraine feel like your actual brain is throbbing inside your skull? Well, this paradox is exactly where the brain kinematics model steps in.
Which brings us to Section 2, the squishy brain hypothesis.
BKM basically asks us to stop thinking of the brain as just some biological computer filled with electrical wires. Instead, we need to start thinking about it as a physical, sponge-like, poroelastic material. It has mass, it's full of fluid, and it actually physically changes shape. And this introduces a concept called the viscoelastic operating margin. According to this model, every neural network functions within a very specific, limited mechanical range. Imagine your brain is like a wet sponge stuffed inside a sealed jar. During ordinary activity, neurons firing, blood pulsing, fluid moving around, the tissue gently expands and contracts. It safely handles this mechanical stress within its operating margin. But when the physical strain gets too close to the limit of what that tissue can handle, boom, the brain activates a protective alarm system. And that alarm system, that's what we feel as a headache.
So, you're probably wondering, what actually pushes the brain to this mechanical limit in the first place? You might immediately think of something structural, like hitting your head. But BKM highlights functional causes of neural strain. Things like prolonged concentration, sustained emotional stress, excessive sensory stimulation, chronic anxiety, sleep deprivation. I mean, let's be real, this is basically just modern everyday life. Even without any physical injury, purely functional loading, like staring at a complicated spreadsheet for 8 hours or stressing out over a relationship, literally builds up physical, distributed neural strain right inside your head.
All right, let's look at how this actually happens in Section 3, strain, space, and pain. So we have this invisible emotional or cognitive stress, right? To understand how that translates into agonizing physical pain, we need to talk about the empty space in your head. Get this, about 20% of your brain's overall volume is actually made up of what's called extracellular space, or ECS. Now, this isn't just empty air. It is a highly dynamic, fluid-filled environment, and when neural strain builds up from all that overthinking or emotional stress, this space actually physically deforms. It widens, it compresses, and it redirects the flow of interstitial fluid.
And this triggers an incredible four-stage chain reaction. Let's walk through it. Step 1 is functional loading. You experience some intense stress or heavy sensory input. Step 2 is the mechanical response. Because your brain is a physical object, those extracellular spaces locally deform under the load. Step 3 is mechanical signaling. This physical squishing and stretching alters the fluid flow and actually pulls on the surrounding cells. And finally, Step 4, the protective response. When that deformation exceeds a safe limit, the brain's pain pathways activate and you get a headache. It's wild. A thought literally becomes a mechanical deformation, which then becomes physical pain.
And the key players in all of this are these amazing cells called astrocytes.
They take up a huge amount of this extracellular environment and help regulate water transport. You can think of them essentially as the brain's built-in pressure valves. BKM hypothesizes that these little star-shaped cells constantly monitor physical strain gradients, which are the abrupt mechanical differences between neighboring regions of the brain. When they sense that the physical tension is getting dangerously high, they signal the pain matrix to let you know.
Okay, so we've connected cognitive stress to physical brain squishing, and physical brain squishing to headaches. That makes sense. But you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with your dreams?
To figure that out, we need to move to Section 4, Brain Fog and Memory.
Before we get to sleep, we first have to look at what happens to our memory when we're experiencing all this neural strain. Let's talk about brain fog for a second. If you've ever had a killer headache or a migraine, you know for a fact it is rarely just pain. People almost always experience things like reduced attention, way slower processing speeds, working memory difficulties, and that incredibly frustrating brain fog. It literally feels like you're trying to push your thoughts through thick molasses.
Now, it is so tempting to just assume that the agonizing pain of the headache is causing the brain fog, right? You heard too much to think straight, but BKM makes a really crucial distinction here between correlation and causation. The pain doesn't cause the fog. Actually, both the headache and the cognitive fog emerge from a shared root. They're both just symptoms of your brain failing to mechanically resolve its stress. The unresolved neural strain actively interferes with efficient memory encoding, which creates the fog, while at the exact same time triggering the pain pathways.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, Sleep, Stress, and Dreams.
Let's see how all this builds up as we head into the night. Think about what happens when we take that unresolved physical strain to bed with us. Sleep is absolutely supposed to be our ultimate reset button. Normally, sleep reactivates your recent memories, processes your emotional experiences, and neatly integrates everything through dreaming. But when someone is suffering from a migraine, that whole process gets derailed. They experience poorer sleep quality, their REM sleep gets completely altered, and there's a much higher chance of having incredibly vivid dreams and nightmares.
And here is the crucial takeaway from all this. The headache isn't magically generating a nightmare. Instead, the BKM model suggests that the unresolved mentation, all that leftover sensory, emotional, or cognitive strain from your waking hours, is desperately trying to reorganize itself while you sleep. Because the brain's physical strain regulation system hasn't fully resolved the load yet, that mental and physical stress bleeds right into your sleep architecture. So, that vivid nightmare? It's literally just your brain's attempt to mentally and symbolically process the exact same unresolved physical strain that gave you the headache in the first place.
I absolutely love this quote because it so perfectly nails the core scientific thesis of the Brain Kinematics Model. It says, neural activity generates distributed viscoelastic strain fields. And when those fields push past the brain's physical limits, the alarm bells ring. It is just such a beautiful, unified perspective. It completely bridges the gap between biomechanics, where your brain physically stretches and squishes, and neurology, where you consciously feel the pain.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. The Brain Kinematics Model shows us that your conscious experience, your physical pain, and your wildest dreams are not isolated events. Not at all. They are intimately, mechanically connected within that squishy, dynamic ecosystem right inside your skull. It totally changes the way we look at a simple headache, doesn't it? So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. How is your brain managing its strain today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep exploring.